more than tariffs, more than tax cuts for his wealthy friends, and even more than his anger over immigration, Donald Trump's campaign was about one thing: retribution. Retribution that he has promised, and retribution that he wants to deliver on against his political enemies, against President Biden, against Liz Cheney, against Jack Smith, against Mark Milley, against anyone in his last administration who spoke out about what a threat to democracy he is and continues to be. But there is a way to push back against that retribution, and President Biden, in the final weeks of his presidency, is using it much to Donald Trump's dismay. And we are going to get into all of that. But before we do, if I could quickly ask you to leave a like on this video, and if you haven't already and you enjoy our channel, to hit that subscribe button. It goes a long way, and it really means the world to me. Now, before we get into what President Biden is doing to preempt and stop Donald Trump's use of lawfare against his political enemies, I want to get into a little bit of the planning of how he would do that in this clip from Nicole Wallace right here.
Hi again, everyone. It's now 5 o'clock in New York. In order to make good on that campaign promise of retribution, Trump is making sure he will have the right people in place in his cabinet, as well as across the rest of the federal government, people who will carry out what the senator's talking about there, that quest for retribution and revenge. So even though Trump's own hand-picked choice to lead the Federal Bureau of Investigation, Christopher Wray, is only 7 years into his 10-year term, Trump this weekend broadcast his intention to replace him with someone else, someone who will follow through with Trump's goal, stated as it is, of weaponizing the Department of Justice for his own purposes. Enter a man named Kash Patel. Listen to how closely aligned he is with Trump.
As we clean up our Capitol, we'll clean up and clean out our deep state.
I'd shut down the FBI Hoover building on day one and reopening the next day as a museum of the deep state.
Those J6 warriors, they were warriors, but they were really more than anything else. They're victims of what happened.
It's a political narrative, and it's tough to defeat. It sounds pretty lethal, you know, storming of this, hijacking of that, insurrection. But when you look at some of the people involved, their lives have been destroyed by the Justice Department.
To get me, somebody would have to shoot through the fake news. And I don't mind that so much.
We will go out and find the conspirators, not just in government, but in the media. Yes, we're going to come after the people in the media who lied about American citizens, who helped Joe Biden rig presidential elections. We're going to come after you. Whether it's criminally or civilly, we'll figure that out. But yeah, we're putting you all on notice.
So that guy, Kash Patel, here's his backstory. He was a former congressional aide for Devin Nunes. Remember him? He was the primary author of the Nunes memo, which accused the FBI and the Department of Justice and their officials of bias in the Russia investigation, something that was never found in multiple audits. He's the author of a children's book. This is my favorite thing about him. The book is called The Plot Against the King. It tells the story of Kash, a wizard, who works to save King Donald from the evil doings of Hillary Clinton and a shifty knight. So. Patel was also the person Donald Trump wanted to install as the CIA deputy director in the waning days of his last administration, although then CIA Director Gina Haspel threatened to quit if he did that. Trump's choice of Kash Patel shows, though, that things are much different now. As Axios reports, quote, Trump advisors are running out of words to describe what's coming in January. They say he feels empowered, emboldened, vindicated, validated, eager to stretch the boundaries of power. He's egged on by Musk and others in picking trusted brawlers for the toughest, most controversial tasks. Writing in The Atlantic, David Frum exposes the constitutional crisis Trump will unleash. Quote, FBI directors wield awesome powers over the liberties of Americans. The unwritten rule governing their appointment, no dismissal except for compelling cause, bulwarked American law and freedom for half of a century. Even first-term Trump dared not openly defy it. But second-term Trump is opening with a bid to junk it altogether.
Donald Trump, Kash Patel, at a period of time, Matt Gaetz, even though that was short-lived, all of his cronies, all of his stooges were planning to use the levers of power within the executive branch of the government to wage the same lawfare against Donald Trump's political enemies that he claimed Democrats were using against him. Of course, a false claim that wasn't happening, but now Donald Trump wants to do that. And Joe Biden recognizes it. Kamala Harris recognized it, and tens of millions of people who voted for her did as well. But not enough people did, unfortunately. And so now Donald Trump is going to try to use all this anger and all the power that he now has to go after his political enemies. But President Biden is getting in his way, and I want to take a look at how right here. The Biden White House is discussing preemptive pardons for those in Donald Trump's crosshairs. The nomination of Kash Patel, who has vowed to pursue Trump's critics as FBI director, has heightened concern within the president's inner circle. President Joe Biden's senior aides are conducting a vigorous internal debate over whether to issue preemptive pardons to a range of current and former public officials who could be targeted with President-elect Donald Trump returning to the White House. Biden's aides are deeply concerned about a range of current and former officials who could find themselves facing inquiries and even indictments, a sense of alarm which has only accelerated since Trump last weekend announced the appointment of Kash Patel to lead the FBI. Patel has publicly vowed to pursue Trump's critics. The White House officials, however, are carefully weighing the extraordinary step of handing out blanket pardons to those who've committed no crimes, both because it could suggest impropriety, only fueling Trump's criticisms, and because those offered preemptive pardons may reject. The deliberations touch on pardoning those currently in office, elected and appointed, as well as former officials who have angered Trump and his loyalists. Those who could face exposure include such members of Congress's January 6th Select Committee like Adam Schiff and former GOP Representative Liz Cheney of Wyoming. Trump has previously said Cheney should go to jail along with the rest of the unselect committee. Also mentioned by Biden's aides for a pardon is Anthony Fauci. I think this is exactly what the Biden administration needs to be doing right now, working to preempt Donald Trump and his cronies from not trying to jail their political opponents, because at least for now, Donald Trump cannot throw whoever he wants in prison, but he can ruin their lives with phony investigations, make people rack up hundreds of thousands, if not millions of dollars in legal fees, and make them a threat for MAGA to go after. And so I think this is the smart thing to do from President Biden, but he has to message why. I agree that if you just start handing out blanket pardons, it seems a little weird, even though we know that Adam Schiff hasn't committed any crimes. There's Liz Cheney, but if you do it, it just comes off sketchy. You have to communicate why you are doing so is because of the lawfare that Donald Trump has already promised. You're not making it up. You're not crying wolf. You're not acting ridiculous. Donald Trump has said this is what he wants to do, and those that he is appointing to positions in his cabinet have as well, and sometimes in even more extreme ways. So this isn't Democrats freaking out. This is Joe Biden taking the necessary steps to protect against the Trump administration. And there are lots of Democrats doing the same. One, of course, is Jasmine Crockett, who is calling out Donald Trump in this clip right here.
But Congresswoman, is this pick more retribution against the rule of law from Trump?
Oh, absolutely. Listen, it is interesting because Trump spent so much time trying to separate himself from Project 2025. But what we see playing out before our eyes is literally Project 2025. One of the main things that was espoused in that document is that he must have loyalists that are going to be in government. Forget whether or not they are qualified. That actually is the only qualification, is that you pray to the orange Jesus, which is known as Trump. And so that's what we have in Patel. It doesn't come down to whether or not he has any law enforcement experience. It doesn't come down to if he understands anything about the FBI. What it comes down to is a guy who was so upset because he got caught being the criminal that he is, and they had the audacity to go after him and to actually prosecute him. And now what he's deciding that he wants to do is he truly wants to weaponize the government, a claim that he continuously projected onto this administration. But here's the deal. The big question is whether or not the current FBI director is going to step down, another person that he actually put into that position, because he still has time on the clock and doesn't necessarily have to leave.
Now, Let's turn to the economy, where experts have warned that Trump's promised tariffs on Canadian and Mexican goods and a hike on Chinese products will hurt the economy and blow up inflation, particularly in import-reliant states like Texas, where you serve from. You've warned the American people to buckle up for economic pain under Trump's plan. But millions of Americans voted for Trump, who campaigned on these tariffs. Even if their economic pain deepens because of them, the tariffs that is, will they turn away from him now?
You know, I have no idea, you know, but I will say that there should definitely be some folk that decide, you know what, maybe that wasn't the best idea to either stay at home and not go and vote for Kamala Harris, or that I decided to get up and go and vote for this guy who was promising tariffs, because I have seen where people have said, well, wait a minute, I thought the tariffs just meant that the other countries were going to pay something. I didn't realize that this was going to impact me. And I think that it's important that the American people see that we saw the Prime Minister for Canada go and speak to him. And basically you have, you know, our friends from up north as well as our friends down south in Mexico seemingly trying to educate the guy that is run on being this great businessman. But what I tried to remind people of over and over again is that this guy isn't allowed to operate a business in the state of New York because he's actually a terrible business person. And this, honestly, this idea, this ploy to throw tariffs onto everything, I don't even understand how Elon can stand for it, because his precious little Tesla, while they may be made in right here in Texas nowadays, here's the reality. The Tesla has components of it that are not made in the United States, just like almost every single thing that we have. Not to mention when we start to talk about agriculture and our food. And the reality is that this is going to impact every facet of our lives.
We need more voices like Jasmine Crockett pushing back against Donald Trump every single day. And we're going to continue to uplift those voices on this show. And if you want to support that, as always, you can hit that subscribe button. You can leave a like on this video. And if you stuck around to the end, you can drop a blue heart in the comments. And until next time, I'll see you soon.